This is the Lenovo Legion Y700, and it might be the best small tablet you can buy for retro gaming, Android gaming, and game streaming. Let's take a look at this powerhouse tablet and see what is included when you pick this up. In the box, we have the tablet, a USB-C brick that appears to be rated for 28 watts, a USB-C cable, a micro SD card removal tool, and some manuals in Chinese, and we'll talk about the language thing in just a moment here. A few of the optional accessories you can purchase for the tablet are a lightweight minimal shell in a transparent frosted color, a black folio case that comes with this magnetically snapping and attaching cover, pops on and off nice and easy there. Working our way around the tablet, we've got a volume rocker and a power button here. On the side, we've got the first of the two USB-C ports and a speaker. On the bottom side, we have the second of the two USB-C ports, a micro SD card slot, and finally the other speaker on the tablet. Unfortunately, it looks like they dropped the 3.5mm jack that was present on the previous version of the tablet. Cameras here on the back. It's really a nice, sleek looking piece of hardware here with this tablet. Before we dive in, let's do a quick overview of what's under the hood, as well as how much the tablet costs. There are actually at least 3 versions of the tablet, so that is one thing important to know if you're looking to pick up one for yourself. The one I'm reviewing today is the 2023 version from China, which is powered by the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 platform and has an 8.8-inch 2560 by 1600 144Hz IPS screen. I'll list the rest of the specs on the screen here for a brief moment. There was a previous 2022 version of the tablet that was powered by the Snapdragon 870 platform and had a very similar screen, but with a maximum refresh of 120Hz instead of 144Hz. I personally have owned the previous edition for the last year until just recently picking up this newer version. And finally, there's a European version that is nearly identical to this 2023 version from China, but with a global ROM, but it also costs significantly more. Personally, I think if you're okay with the weight, buying on AliExpress is probably the best option depending on where you are in the world, especially if there's a sale going on. The price for the 12GB of RAM and 256GB of storage option usually hovers around $280 to $350 but may also get additional discounts during sale events. I picked up this particular tablet with my own money, and if you're interested in grabbing one for yourself, please do us a favor and check out the affiliate link in the description below. I really love the size of this tablet. It's small enough to hold in one hand or have in your lap without feeling cumbersome, but big enough that text isn't too hard to read and UI elements in game are clearly visible. Really, the only other tablet in the class is the current iPad mini. While I don't have one of those, I do have an ancient iPad 3 over here to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. For size comparison, here's the Y700 in the middle, the Anbernic RG28XX on the right here, and an iPhone 15 Pro Max on the left. All right, let's take a quick break from looking at my hands and let you guys put a face to my name since I'm new on the channel here, and talk a little bit about why I am recommending a tablet on a handheld review channel. I think there's a lot of cool controllers coming out these days, such as the GameSir G8 here, that really allow us to take advantage of high-end smartphones and tablets. And you know, I've played around with the smartphone thing a little bit before, but that wide 19:9 aspect ratio really leaves a lot to be desired. You're wasting a lot of real estate. It's definitely a cool option if you already have a phone, but I don't know if it makes sense to buy a phone just to do that. But that's really where this tablet, the Y700, comes in here. There's really only 2 tablets in this weight class, the iPad mini and the Y700, that have, you know, pretty high levels of performance, great screens, in about that 8 to 9 inch size range. There's a lot of 7-inch tablets that are pretty garbage in terms of their performance and specs or subpar resolution on their displays. And there's plenty of really great big tablets. I actually used to own the Galaxy S8 Plus, but that thing was huge. Definitely not a handheld option as far as I'm concerned. So that being said, I think that this Legion here really is probably the best option to get something that's larger than your typical gaming handheld, but not a full-blown TV, laptop, or gaming console setup. With the ability to attach a telescoping controller or set it on the table and use a controller with it, you really get the best of both worlds. You can use it as a tablet, you can do all the normal things you would do on a tablet, like surfing the web, playing Disney Plus for your kids, whatever it is you do. But the controller really takes it to the next level as far as doing emulation and game streaming on the tablet. And that's why I'm talking about this tablet today on this video and potentially recommending it to somebody if you are somebody that maybe doesn't have great close-up eyesight and don't want to have to put your glasses on all the time. Maybe you just want a little bit more real estate. Maybe you're doing game streaming, playing games with lots of tiny UI text, or playing RPGs with tons of text in them. In that case, the 9-inch display is really awesome and it's super crisp on this device, so I think you'll be happy if that's something that you're really looking for. Now, of course, if you don't care so much about the portability and the controller aspect, yeah, you can get a laptop, yeah, you can play on your gaming console and use your TV, but if you just want to kick back on the couch, take it on vacation, use it for other things as well, I think that honestly this is a really great option. The best part about this tablet might be its incredible 1600p 144Hz IPS display. At 8.8 inches and 1600p, everything is super crisp and really pops. While it might not be an OLED panel, the color saturation is more vivid than many other IPS displays that I've seen. Take a look here at these colors. They do look pretty much just as good in real life as they do on camera here. Here's just a really quick screen comparison of the colors on the iPhone 15 Pro Max and the Y700. As you can see, they both do look pretty good, even though we're looking at an OLED versus an IPS display here. The screen comes with the options to either choose an automatic refresh rate, 144Hz, 120Hz, or 60Hz. This is important for retro gaming because we do want to be able to divide those frames evenly, so you'll want to set it to 120 or 60 when you're playing content that is at 60 Hz. This is pretty much, if not exactly, the screen that you would find in the Lenovo Legion Go. And so if any of you are familiar with that handheld, you know just how good that display does look. As you'll notice here with my studio lighting though, it is super glossy, so if you're somebody that hates glossy screens, you might want to pick up a screen protector for that. Since this tablet is the version sold in China and surrounding countries, it does come out of the box set to the Chinese language. Thankfully, it's easy to switch to English during setup. For this unit, I have actually left it on the stock ROM. Thankfully, with a little tinkering, we can still install the Google Play Store on the tablet and have access to all of our familiar apps there. This runs on Lenovo's ZUI and is overall a pretty clean and simple build of Android, with one major addition, the slide out on the left hand that I'll show off to you here. The slider present in games on this tablet allows you to pull it out and switch between a balance mode, a performance mode, and an energy saving mode, as well as turning on a few other features like this floating FPS display here or a screen recording widget. Of course, it goes without saying that this tablet can handle pretty much anything you can throw with it as far as Android gaming, and is a great option there, albeit a little bit big if you aren't going to be using an attachable controller. One other thing I want to talk about today is controllers. Normally we'd have a video portion that's dedicated to talking about how the buttons feel, how good the joystick sensitivity is, are the triggers Hall effect, is it membrane, is it clicky? Obviously we don't have all that stuff to talk about today because, you know, the tablet is just a big slab of metal and glass and plastic, but we can talk about some of the controller options that we use with the tablet in the telescoping world. Definitely subscribe and keep an eye out on this channel, as I'm going to have a couple upcoming videos detailing some of the future telescoping controller options coming out, as well as I'm thinking about doing a shootout video where I show multiple different controllers and how well they work with your phones, tablets, etc. If you have a specific controller you're looking to see used with something like this Legion Y700 tablet, definitely leave a comment down below and we'll take that into consideration and see if we can pick one up for that video review. The first and perhaps most ubiquitous option that I want to talk about is the tried and true GameSir G8. This controller has been at the top of all sorts of videos over the past several months on the internet. It works great, it's stretchy, fits your phone. I've modified mine so you can hyperextend it to fit something like this tablet. There's also the new GameSir G8 Plus Bluetooth edition, which I think is a little bit easier to stretch wider, but it also has that wireless option, so it's a great option for something like the Surface Duo. And then the other option that I have today is the BSP D8 Pro. This thing is a wide boy. It can stretch big enough to fit, I think, 11 or 12-inch tablets. It is Bluetooth, so you don't get that same level of latency perhaps that you might with the G8. Personally, I don't think it's a big deal. I'm not playing super accurate stuff where I just have to have the exact millisecond of reaction time, but I know there are people out there that are really passionate about that, so if that's you, maybe the Bluetooth option isn't for you. This controller is really hard to be at. I think it's around $30 price point on AliExpress. It does take a while to maybe ship to you, but it does have Hall effect, triggers, and joysticks. It does have these micro switch buttons, so if you're somebody that really hates those, that might not be the controller for you. But I think these are potentially two of the top controller options that you can consider for this tablet. For now, there is another video coming up soon where we talk about a new contender on the scene that might be cheaper than the G8, but better than the DSP, so stay tuned for that one. It's that section of the video where we talk about retro emulation and what this device can do. I'm also going to cut in some clips of the tablet audio so you can get a taste of what that sounds like. In short, it's good, not mind-blowing, and probably better than most cheap handhelds. Take a quick listen here to Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo. As far as emulation goes, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you now that for all your 2D and early 3D systems, this tablet will have no issues playing them at all. And because we have that performance on tap, we can do awesome things like CRT shaders and LCD grid shaders on handhelds, which leverages that performance to make your old systems look potentially even better on this display. As you might be able to tell by the game on the screen, I am going to start with PSP when we're talking about performance here, and in this case, it runs beautifully at a 6x resolution, taking the full advantage of that 1600p display with no issues whatsoever. If you're a big PSP fan and want a big screen, this is one of the perfect devices for it. On screen now we have PS2 Emulation via Nether SX2, and this is where the conversation starts becoming a little bit more nuanced as to what this can run. In my experience playing with this tablet, it typically took the performance mode in order to achieve a 3.5x resolution scale on PS2, which gives us about a 1400p resolution at 16:9, which is filling the pixels on this display. Any higher than that, and I did suffer some slowdown issues. And there's one game where I did run into some performance issues, which was Ratchet and Clank. Even at that same 3.5x performance, I did have some slowdowns during the game. But by and large, most of the games ran just fine on the tablet. If you wanted to drop down to the balanced performance mode to extend your battery life a little bit longer, I did try out Burnout at a 2.5x resolution, and that seemed to run okay. So if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of resolution there, it still looks great. Extend your battery life a little bit. Moving on to a couple quick GameCube tests. You can see here Mario Kart Double Dash. This is running at a 4x internal resolution on just the balanced power profile mode with no issues. It runs great and there are no problems there on this title that is relatively easy to run. Moving on to the quintessential test, F-Zero GX. I did have to drop it down to a 3x resolution internally, as well as bump it up to the performance profile in order to see smooth performance here. So this is sort of taxing the high end of what we can expect out of the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 chip on this tablet. Moving on to Switch, I've got SteamWorld Dig 2 here playing actually at a 2x handheld for a 1440p resolution without any issues at all. 2D and indie games on the Switch should run pretty fine on this system as long as you don't run into emulator or graphics driver incompatibility issues. Next up, we've got Prince of Persia. This is docked at 1080p performance. I do have occasional slowdowns in the balance mode, but in the performance mode, I didn't seem to have any issues with frame rates, so it's solid there on a easier to run 3D title. Finally, here I tested Kirby, and this is where I started running into some issues where I really just couldn't get a stable frame rate out of the device. So I'm not sure if this is the performance limitation of this chip, or this game, graphics drivers, or some combination thereof that make this one a little bit harder to run. So just keep that in mind if you're buying this to play some Switch games, that some of the catalog is going to run, but you are still going to run into some issues with certain titles in the catalog, especially heavier 3D titles. All right, next I want to talk about something that is very near and dear to my heart and possibly my favorite use for this tablet above all else, and that is game streaming. Shown here, I am using the Sunshine host and the Moonlight client on the tablet in order to stream from my desktop PC that's in my house here. That desktop's on a hardwired gigabit Ethernet connection, and I've got Wi-Fi 6 to the tablet here. As you can see from the on-screen display, I'm averaging around 7 milliseconds of decoding latency, which overall is really good for an Android device. And with a stable network at your home, that should yield frame delays of less than 1 frame, which is about 16 milliseconds of total time. So it's entirely playable. I really don't notice the lag at all. Maybe if you're playing a first-person shooter and you're doing really precise movements, it might start to show up. But at a 7 millisecond time, I think for the majority of people that is going to be imperceptible. Hades 2 is one of my favorite games to stream to the tablet, as the colors are absolutely gorgeous and vivid, and I can run it at the full 144 frames per second, 1600p from my desktop PC, and watch that on this glorious display. As far as temperature goes, the frame of the device definitely gets a bit warm to the touch, as well as a little bit on the back here, but unlike a handheld, it doesn't really matter as much here if you are using either a detachable controller or setting on a surface and playing it with a controller. If you plan on playing a gacha game or high-end emulation with touch controls only, then yeah, I might recommend a case to provide a bit of a buffer from the heat, but really it's not a big deal. And real quick, before we wrap up this video, I'm going to briefly touch on battery life. My testing was done with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on at a 50% screen brightness. For game streaming in a balanced mode, I had about a loss of about 1% battery every 5 minutes, which is going to translate to roughly 8 hours of total battery runtime. And when playing something a little bit heavier, PS2 Ratchet & Clank at 3.5x performance to really stress the device, I saw about 1% of battery drop every just over 2 minutes, which gives us an estimated runtime of about 3.5 hours. To wrap this up, there's plenty of things to like about this tablet. There's plenty of power with the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 platform. Lets you play up to PS2 GameCube no problem. It's a great size, not too big, not too small. As we talked about, the display is excellent, crisp and colorful, plus a fast refresh rate, which makes it great for game streaming. Some of the negatives that I might think about are the fact that you have to use an external controller with it, not as convenient as a dedicated handheld for streaming, maybe something like the G Cloud or the upcoming Neo Evo. And also the availability can be an issue, as it is not really in the US market. If you're here in North America, you're limited to buying it on AliExpress. And if you're in Europe, the European version is significantly more expensive, so you may still want to look into the AliExpress version. A few other things to think about that aren't necessarily positive or negative is that just recently, in fact, while I was recording this video, there's a leak of a possible new version of this tablet containing the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chipset, which, as you may have heard, is significantly more powerful. We've seen that in a few flagship phones already, and it is probably much better for Switch emulation. There's also the consideration that if you're using this as a tablet as well, you may already have some investment in the Apple or iOS ecosystem, and the iPad mini might make sense there a little bit more, as you can still now run emulation on that and do game streaming. Finally, there's the other devices to think about. As I just mentioned, the Logitech G Cloud exists if you don't need as much power and want to just stream or play some lightweight games up to PSP. The Neo Evo is coming out in a few months here, and that's going to have power similar to something like the Odin 2 Pro or Max, so that's going to be able to play pretty much all of the retro gaming catalog that's available on Android right now as well. That's got a 7-inch 120Hz OLED, so the screen may be better in some ways, although you are losing that extra 1.8 inches, which is one of the things that really sells this tablet, having that nice, big, vivid screen. So that's up to your personal preference to decide. Thanks for watching and happy gaming. Cat tax?